So today's session, we split into two halves. The first half, I will talk about Kiro, its features, and show you a demo of Spec Driven Development using Kiro. And the second half, you will actually have a hands-on workshop where you can try it out yourself. So I will introduce to you the features, show you some of the things that can be done with Kiro, and then after that, you can try it out yourself in the second half. So I'll spend about 25 minutes talking about the features. So let's get started. Okay, so for Kiro, it will look familiar to you if you have used VS Code, right? Visual Studio Code. It looks exactly like that. That's because it's forked out from VS Code code base. And then Amazon, they built on top of that features that are integrated into VS Code, right? So it's called Kiro. It's a subscription-based service because it relies on underlying LLMs to perform the agentic coding features. But what I'll show you is what it can do. Okay, so the special thing about Kiro is this thing called spec mode, right? Or spec driven development. So what most of us are used to is vibe coding, where we prompt the coding agent, and then it helps us to code or help us to debug our code. Spec-driven development is slightly different. Structured way of building software, starting from requirements to design to task planning, and then finally coding. Right? So we don't just do coding right at the start. We actually do structured requirements and design before coding. I'll go through these slides quickly so that I can show you a demo. But if any of you wants to dive deeper into some of these things which I've shown, just catch me at the sidelines after the talk or during the rest of the day. So one of the features of Kiro is called agent steering. So agent steering is a way for us to give some guidance to the coding assistant on how they write the software for us, right? So one of the things we can provide to Kiro as agent steering is this markdown file on the product that you want to build, right? So you can actually define your product overview as a markdown file to describe what your product is, what are the workflows related to your product, and for example, what are the use cases so that it can build the software or it can define the requirements and design that is aligned to your product overview. Right. Another example of agent steering is providing a project structure, right, before it even starts coding. So if you have an enterprise standard or a standard way of structuring your project files, your test files, and so on, you can actually define it as a markdown file so that when it starts coding, it puts the right files in the right place for you, right? So you can even define how you want your naming conventions to be, for example, right? So that when it writes where it creates those files, it creates them in the right naming conventions. A third example of agent steering is defining your technology stack. So you can say, what do you want to use for your front end? Say React. What do you want to use for your back end? And what are the dependencies you may have for your project. You can define them as markdown files as well. So that's agent steering. And it goes beyond that as well. You can even talk about coding conventions. If you have that in your organization, you can predefine the coding conventions so that it sticks to those conventions. And just 2 days ago, Kiro, the latest release of Kiro has also introduced support for agents.md. Right, so the markdown file for agents is now a standard, so it's an open standard now. So if you define an agents.md file in any of your other coding assistants, say in Cursor or any other coding assistant, you can put it here as well and it will follow that. So it's aligned to the standards for agent markdowns. All right. One other feature is agent hooks. So agent hooks It's kind of like your webhooks where upon a certain event, say when you save a file, when you update a file, you want to trigger some workflow from the agent. Right, so one cool example of using agent hooks is defining your security standards, right? So you want to make sure that whenever your developer writes or a developer writes code, it doesn't have hard-coded credentials, it doesn't have security vulnerabilities. So we can define all those in a agent hook so that whenever you save a file, it actually does the security scan for you. So let me show you an example of that. So here is an example where I've defined, where I will define an agent hook for security review. So here is an existing piece of code, and we are now defining an agent hook saying, oh, if you spot any of those API keys, private keys, IP addresses, and so on, help me to remediate it, help me to fix it, right? Identify the risk, automatically remediate the code using a secure alternative. Right, so here we have saved the agent hook. It's been created. Upon file save, it will perform that action. Right, so here is an example. I have an existing piece of code, just a simple example where I start hard coding an IP address into my code. And when I click save, it triggers a security scan using the prompt that I gave. And here is identified as high risk for my hard-coded IP address, and it's fixed it for me as well. So it's changed it to use an environment variable, and if it's not present, then it will just default to localhost. So this is an example of a security scan shifted left to the point where you save your file rather than as part of your CI/CD process. And speaking of agent hooks, there's also other ways you can use it. So one way we can use it is if you have a UX designer who has created a Figma UX design, you can actually use agent hooks to say, whenever you save the file, compare what is coded versus what has been defined in your Figma design. Right? So this integrates both agent hooks and MCP, meaning through MCP for Figma, you can say refer to the design, check your code, make sure it is aligned. Right, and speaking of MCP, this is the other feature that Kiro has, which is integration with MCP server. Here I have MCP server integration to say, given a design from my UX designer, help me generate the code for that design. Right, so straight from Figma to code using Figma MCP. So this is an example. Here I have integrated MCP for Figma already. And my designer has created a design in Figma itself. So now I'm just prompting it to say, implement the following design. So in my enterprise, we use Angular. So I say, generate the code in Angular using this Figma design given by my designer. I copy the URL, and I just paste it here. Right? And just from this, because of the MCP integration, it generates the code straight from the MCP for Figma. And this is the site that is created from the design directly Figma to code. Okay, and another example of MCP server is we could use it to refer to the most up-to-date documentation. So here I have integrated with AWS documentation and knowledge base. Right, so I have a piece of code written for local deployment. So this is the application written locally. And then I asked in a prompt saying, refer to AWS documentation and help me to check whether this code can be run on AWS Lambda. And what it does is not only does it tell you what are the issues with your code when deployed to Lambda, it also creates a migration plan for you. Right, so here it's suggested, because I'm having some file transfer mechanism, so it's suggested the first step I need to do to change in my architecture is to change to S3 pre-signed URLs for the file transfer. Right, so this is another example of how we can integrate to MCP servers. Okay, but the key thing I want to show you today is this thing called Spec Driven Development or Spec Mode in Kiro. And in my opinion, Spec Driven Development is the best thing that has ever happened to Agile since Agile started. Right? And those of you who have been doing Agile development, you should be familiar with this diagram, and I believe many of you have seen this diagram before. Basically, what the user said they want to the engineering team usually is not what we end up building, right? And because along the way, different personas, your project manager, your business analyst, or even the user themselves may not be able to specify what they want according to what they really need, right? And I find that using Kiro to develop software through this spec-driven development actually embraces this challenge, meaning it's okay to have such a problem. We will adapt along the way using spec-driven development in a dynamic way, right? And that's what I want to that's the main thing I want to show you today. So this demo is a real use case I had at my organization. And this is what my user described, what he wanted us to build, right? He wanted to build an application that can do basically file chunking, right? So split a large file, say a few 500 megabyte file, into smaller pieces, smaller chunks of 5 files of 100 megabyte each, for example, right? So that's his main requirement. And he has only specified it in this way. He didn't give any other requirement. This is what he said he wanted, right? Just to give you context, actually what was in the user's mind is he wanted a graphical user interface. He wanted a place in the UI where you can drag and drop the file, right? So that you just drag and drop the file, then you do the processing and split the file into multiple chunks. He wants a user interface for you to configure. I want to split into 5 chunks, or I want to split into chunks of 10 megabyte each, right? So he wants different ways to split it. And he also wants a way to download the split files, right? He wants to be able to download individual files after splitting, and he wants to be able to download all the split files as a zip file, right? So this is what he really wanted, but he didn't say, right? What he said is just this, right? And this is how we're going to try to build the software using just what he said in these words to build a software. And in real time, it took us 6 hours to build this using Kiro. And actually, in the traditional way of software development, when I asked my team, how long does it, what's your estimate? How long does it take for you to build this? The team gave 2 weeks, right? So estimated 2 weeks of development time brought down to 6 hours to build this software using Kiro. And I'll just play this 6 hours as a video, and I'll talk through the 6 hours, right? But don't worry, it's just about 10 minutes. So I've sped it up to 10 minutes. And on the top left, you will see the timer there. That's the time in real time, right? So that will be very fast because we've cut it down to 10 minutes. So here we started, and I asked my user to type in his requirements. So this is my product owner typing in his requirements in front of the IDE sitting next to me. So he wants to have an application to split large files into smaller chunks and then specify it as an initial prompt into Kiro in spec mode. Right? So Kiro, what it does at the beginning is to create user stories and acceptance criteria for you. So the first thing Kiro does is not to code, but come up with the requirements based on what you prompted. So here Kiro, within about a minute, has come up with about, I think, 7 user requirements, right? And all with proper acceptance criteria in there. And so I asked my user, okay, are you happy with it? You want to modify it? Right? We can modify it if you want, but he said, okay, let's go ahead, right? So we take that initial requirement and we tell Kiro, okay, please proceed to design. And here, within another minute or so, it's created a design. And straight away, my user saw, oh, CLI interface, command line interface. No, I wanted a graphical user interface, right? So Kiro made an assumption that we wanted a CLI. And actually, the user wants graphical user interface. So now, we have the prompt saying, instead of CLI, please design it such that we have a UI, right? And then Kiro adjusts the design based on that in real time in the file, right? So in case you didn't catch that, take a look again. So it updates the file in real time, right? Okay, so now you can see in the design there's specs, there's design related to using a UI and having a backend API to support that. Okay, so as the user reads the requirements and the design, he starts to have more and more questions in his head, so we decided to just use a to-do file to keep track of that. So there are already 2 questions in his mind, right? And the great thing about using spec mode in Kiro is that the more questions you ask, the more detailed the design is going to be, right? So the first question he asks is, how is the file going to be sent from front end to back end? Right? What's the mechanism for that? The moment we ask that question, the design is updated to show how we're going to tackle that. How we're going to do the upload from front end to back end is documented in the design now. If you do a diff, that's what you see. So that's the first question the user had. And then the user has a new requirement in his head now. Oh, I want to support a file of 1 terabyte, right? Make sure your design can handle that. So now we add this in. And Kiro will treat this as a new requirement and go back to requirements. And now you see it's added a new requirement and also gone back to the design to update the design to make sure we handle 1 terabyte files. Right? So you can see we can iterate with new questions, we can add requirements, we can update the design in real time. And then there's a new question my PO had. He wants to know if we are streaming the file, at a large file, from front to back, how does the back know how large the file is before it do the chunking parameters, right? So when he asks this question, again, the design is updated with more detail to answer that question. So your design gets more and more detailed every time we ask a question. And at this point, I ask, are you happy with the requirements and the design? And this is just 19 minutes, right? Less than 20 minutes. So then he said, yes, let's proceed. And now when we proceed after design, we don't code yet. We create a task plan, right? So this is a project plan from task 1 to task 10, what exactly we need to do, split up into individual tasks, right? And then once we are happy with the task defined, as you can see, the tasks are also traceable back to requirements. Every task is traceable back to requirements. So we have end-to-end traceability from requirements to design to task plan. And now we start coding, right? So this is at about 24-minute mark, we start coding. And this is where, when it starts coding, it also makes sure it generates unit tests along the way. Every task must pass all unit tests before it is considered done. So here you can see it hit a unit test fail, and then it tries to debug by itself. So now it fixed one of the problems, and now it fixed all the problems. So then that task is marked as passed, right? So all unit tests are passed before it moves on to the next task, right? And this is where, this is about 36 minutes into the project, right? And we'll let it code and let it build the rest of the software. This is where, as a developer, we'll just sit there and wait, right? Maybe drink a glass of beer or drink a glass of wine, right? And we'll wait for it to do the coding. And so it will also take care of error handling, validation, performance optimization as part of the task, right? So it's not just meeting the requirements that the user specified, but making sure it's robust and resilient software. And this is, so once it's done, we test the application, right? And this is the first time we see the screen, and we try to add a file and see whether it works. And straight away, my users say, "Oh, the blue color font is not, it's very hard to read. I can't see." So we take note of that for now, right? We test the software, and we try to upload a file. Oops, we hit an error, right? So there looks to be a bug. We check the logs. There are some error messages in the logs. So what we do, typically now with coding agents, we don't debug ourselves, right? We copy and paste the error code and tell the agent that we have an error. This is the error code, fix it. And so it tries to fix it. And once it has fixed, we test again, right? So here we try again to upload a large file. And then we try to upload. And now this time, upload is successful, which is good. It's fixed the problem. And then just verifying the logs to make sure everything's okay, no error messages, just informational messages. So that's good. And then we continue testing by chunking the files, right? So this is where we specify how many chunks we want, and then split it up. And we can see it split it up successfully. And we try to download the entire zip file, make sure it works. We try to download individual chunks, and it works. So that's good. But at this point, my user also noticed, oh, the gray color buttons look like it's disabled. So maybe later we need to fix that. Right. So first thing, so now we focus on the UX issues, right? So my user said, the blue color hard to read. Let's ask it to change the color. It tried to change the color, but it made it worse. Right? So we said, oh, it's worse. Change it to cyan color instead. Right? And then it changed to a color which, okay, now user is happy with it. Okay, happy with that color. Let's see what other problems we have. Right? So it's testing now. Right? We'll test other issues. So here we try different method of chunking, make sure it works. So this is where the gray color button looks disabled, right? So let's fix that as well, right? The buttons, gray background, not good, right? So ask it to fix. So it agrees with us, and it changes the color to something more acceptable. So this is good now. And the last thing I think we want to check is that we are able to upload multiple files and upload large files to see whether it works. So unfortunately, at this point, we didn't have 1 terabyte file, so we tried a 2 gig file just to make sure it works. And when we have multiple files, we can select between the two for chunking. Right? At this point, it's about the 6-hour mark where we finished. So we have built the software, we have tested the software, we have fixed the issues, and we've even taken care of UX-related issues. And then at this point, I say, we are doing a lot of testing manually. Why not just automate the testing as well, right? The end-to-end browser testing. So here I prompted Kiro to say, help me automate my live verification test, my LV. So it's created a design for the LV, created the documentation for the LV using mermaid diagrams, right? And automated it using Playwright, right? So here I have LV automation, live verification automation done for me. And then after it's done the testing, I can verify my test results. So you see here it's tested in Firefox, in Chrome, in Safari, in mobile, all tested. Right, so this is an example of end-to-end flow from requirements to build software to live verification automation, all done from the IDE. Right, and of course, we have all the artifacts there as well if the user needs to see the artifacts, right? And I believe this is the way we're going to do software development going forward. In fact, I believe an agile team can now be a size of 2, right? 1 experienced engineer and 1 domain or functional expert, sort of like my PO, sitting together in front of an IDE, building software together. And we did this in 6 hours. As compared to when I asked an entire agile team to estimate, they gave an estimate of 2 weeks. So hopefully this has given you a glimpse of what you can do with Spec Driven Development. In the second half of this session, you will have a chance to try it out hands-on with Kiro in Workshop Studio. And this is the website if you want to download it for yourself, Kiro. And it used to be on waitlist, but the waitlist is over now, so everyone can download it right now. All right, so with that, I leave you to the workshop with the rest of the crew. This is my LinkedIn. If you're interested, let's connect. Okay. And this is the feedback link, the QR code for the feedback for this session as well. So please help to provide some feedback so that we can improve as well. Okay, so thank you very much. My name is Ray. I'm known as Ray G in the community. And I'll hand you off to the crew to help run through the workshop. Thank you.